In this video, I'm going to show you how to use formulas or functions in Google Sheets to do calculations. In the Work Energy Lab, after we collected the data, we had a series of calculations we needed to do on the data. We needed to find things like distance the cart traveled, work done in the cart, initial and final kinetic energy of the cart, difference between change in kinetic energy and work done in the cart. Those are all calculations that we needed to do. What many of you did, and I don't think this is all that surprising, is you got your calculator out. For distance travel, I went and subtracted final, ending, minus starting position in my calculator, and then typed the answer into that cell. That process works okay if you're going to do a small number of calculations. But if you're going to do a larger number of calculations or a series of repetitive calculations, like the same calculation over and over and over again with multiple trials, that process can become time-consuming and long. It also increases the likelihood that I make a mistake somewhere. If I type a number into my calculator wrong or type a number back into my sheet wrong, that can be a mistake that could impact the rest of my results in my lab. Also, if I need to correct that mistake, I have to go back and redo all the calculations on my calculator if I wanted to correct a mistake. So there's an easier way to do this or a faster way to do this, and this is using functions or formulas in Google Sheets. So one thing to notice about Google Sheets or a spreadsheet in general is that it's made up of all these series of rectangles. We call those cells. Each cell is given a column and a row. So a letter to indicate its column and a number to indicate its row. So the one that I've clicked in here is actually B20. So you see B and 20 are highlighted. It also says B20 up here, which is the cell that I've indicated here. So I use those cell numbers and letters to indicate the different values in my table. I use them like variables in an equation. So if I think about what I'm going to do for distance of the cart traveled, I want to take this number and subtract, or this number, excuse me, ending position and subtract starting position. So the way I tell Google Sheets that I want to do a formula or function is I hit an equal sign. What the equal sign says is anything I type after this is a formula or a function, and I want you to present the result of that formula or function in this cell. So if I want to do ending minus starting, I just indicate those cells by using their numbers and letters. So B9 is the ending position and B8 is the starting position, and then hit enter and it does the calculation for me. Now I want to do this calculation multiple times. I wanted to do for each of the 3 trials, and it's the same calculation for each of the 3 trials, ending position minus starting position. So if I wanted to copy that calculation, what I can do is grab this little box and drag across, and then it copies that calculation for me. Google Sheets also shifts the column 1 to the right for each 1 column to the right that I've moved. So I shifted B9 minus B8 to C9 minus C8 to D9 minus D8. So if I copy a function to a new column, what it does is it changes the column letter to match that column. If I was going to go down a row, what it would end up doing is shifting the numbers for the rows. So if I copied 1 row down, this would be D10 minus D9. That's not what I want to do, but that would tell you what's going to happen if you're going to go down copying and pasting. So I've done those 3 calculations very quickly, just by entering in that formula and then copying it into the other cells. Now there are ways to freeze a cell in a function. We're not going to worry about that today. We can talk about that later. The next calculation I wanted to do was kinetic energy. And so in order to do kinetic energy, I'm going to do half the mass. So I'm going to do 0.5 instead of half, but I could do 1 over 2. It doesn't matter. Times the mass, here's my cart mass, times velocity squared, or initial velocity squared. First thing you notice is that in order to do multiplication in Google Sheets, you use the star instead of an X. The star is telling Google Sheets I'm multiplying these numbers together. In order to do something to an exponent or something to a power, there's 2 ways I could do that. I could do B11 star B11. That tells me I'm multiplying B11 twice, which is B11 squared. Or I could tell it I'm going to square B11. If you use the caret symbol, what it's telling Google Sheets is this is going to be the base of an exponent, and what's following is what the exponent is on that base. So there I've done my calculation. Again, I'd want to repeat that across, but I'm going to do final kinetic energy first. The first thing Google Sheets is doing here is it's saying, hey, look, you have a function above this. Maybe you want the same function shifted 1 row down here. which for final velocity I want, but for mass I don't want it to shift it one row down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to accept that, but I'm going to go in and modify it. Instead of B8, the mass is actually in B7, and so there we go with my final kinetic energy. I'm then going to copy those across the same way I copied distance traveled. I'm going to finish up these next calculations. Work is force multiplied by distance, and then change in kinetic energy. Oh, there's distance traveled. Change in kinetic energy is final kinetic energy minus initial kinetic energy. Let's copy those across. Difference between work and kinetic energy. Take kinetic energy, subtract work. Cool. Copy that across. And then finally, percent difference. I would do change in kinetic energy minus work done. I am putting those in parentheses because I wanted to do that first. And then we're going to divide it by the work done on the cart. What's going on here? Oh, B31. Sorry. So there, what happened was I said B30, which is not a numerical value. So if you see what it did is it said value. This is an error. It tells me I can't divide by trial 1. That makes no sense. So it tells me that there's an error in there. I've also set this to be a percentage, and the way you can do that is to click Format as percents. So there we go. We've done all the calculations for my lab, and we did that in about 5 minutes. If you're punching this in your calculator, it's probably going to take you at least 15 minutes to do all those calculations. Now there's another advantage here, and this other advantage is if I made a mistake somewhere along the way in my data collection, I don't have to repeat all the calculations. I can just correct the mistake in my data table, and it will correct all the calculations. And if we look at my 3 trials, trial 2 and trial 3 look pretty good, 1.5% and 2.7%. Those both verify work energy theorem. But trial 1 does not look as good, negative 15%. And so I might ask myself, is there something wrong with trial 1 that means they have a much higher percent difference than the other 2? And so what I did was I went back and maybe I looked at my lab partner and said, hey, what did you have for the data here in trial 1? And I found that I entered the cart mass in incorrectly. Instead of 0.417 kilograms, it should be 0.471 kilograms. That's a really easy mistake to make. It's called a transposition error. And so I correct that mistake. Now, if I type these all in my calculator, what I'd have to do is go back and recalculate the initial kinetic energy, go back and recalculate the final kinetic energy, go back and recalculate the change in kinetic energy, the difference, and then the percent difference. But since I used formulas instead, Google Sheets automatically redid those calculations for me. I didn't have to go back and type them in my calculator. So just by correcting that mass, it corrects all my calculations, and I get something less than 5%. That looks pretty good. So a few other things with Google Sheets. There are set functions that you can use in Google Sheets. We're not going to use any of them on this one, and if we come across where we want to use one, I'll talk about that. There are also ways that I could say, hey, I want to use this mass for all 3 trials, and to tell it to freeze that mass when I copy and paste it. Again, if we're going to need to do that, I'll come back and show you how to do that. But this kind of gives you an idea of how to set up the different functions or formulas in Google Sheets to do each of the calculations. Really, this is kind of like baby programming here when you're setting up these individual formulas in these different cells.